Hello and welcome once again to Social Studies. This is assignment 2.4, and I promise you, I know I promise this all the time, but today I really promise you this will be short. So, first of all, this is going along with the pink sheet for the Columbian Exchange and colonization. It looks like this, although you won't have a colored picture necessarily. Um, if you are in the gray cohort, there's a good chance you did not receive this yet because I forgot to give them out in some of the classes. So don't stress about it. You have two choices here. You can stop right now and do this after you return to school, and I give you a pink sheet, which will be tomorrow. Or you can use Cami down at the bottom of the assignment and fill it in. Although, either way, it's up to you. Um, you will have to have it done. I guess you will have homework if you wait for the paper copy, but this is a really short note sheet. It won't take you very long. This will be a short video. All right, so we're talking about something called the Columbian Exchange, and this picture will sum it up here in the notes, but we'll go through and I will pause and give you a chance to fill in the notes either way. All right, so during the Age of Exploration, starting in 1492, Columbus comes into contact with people in what they was sometimes referred to as the New World, North and South America, which previously Europeans did not know exist. And as far as we know, there had been no contact between people in America and people in Europe or Africa or Asia for pretty much forever, going back until before the land bridge, thousands and thousands of years ago. Now, meanwhile, Europe and Asia and Africa had been interacting with one another, and they had been exchanging, they had been trading with one another, exchanging ideas, technologies, germs, all these things that get mixed around as people interact with one another. That doesn't happen with North and South America. And for a variety of reasons, even within North and South America, there wasn't as much interaction as there was over here, mostly because of geography. That's not a concern. Now, starting with Columbus's first voyage, Columbus brought things with him. He traded with native people he found. He took things back with him. This is going to kick off a sort of worldwide exchange of goods, ideas. Foods are a big thing, germs, technologies. All these things will sort of get mixed around the entire world, things that had not previously been. Some of the things will end up being good, some of them not so good, as we will see. So, let me just give you an example here. When the ending point of this time period, this Columbian Exchange, it's really open-ended, because you could argue that even today, now we have globalization, we have worldwide trade, and as you are very much aware, viruses, invasive species, technologies, goods, products, foods, all of these things get mixed around from one continent to another, from one culture to another. So things can spread around very quickly. That was not the case before Columbus. So therefore, historians have named this the Columbian Exchange. Sometimes it's referred to as the Great Exchange, but it's basically just this mixing that goes on. So after Columbus in 1492, over the next 100 years, there's going to be many different explorers traveling across the Atlantic, looking for a water route to Asia, and then later looking to claim lands in North America or South America, even more South America, I guess. There's also going to be people who we don't know the names of, not famous explorers, but one of the first groups of people to sort of take advantage of this ability or knowledge that they could cross the Atlantic Ocean, thanks to the knowledge, the better maps, the technology, the ships, the compass, things like that, is going to be fishermen. Now, especially fishermen from France, but from from European fishermen who had pretty much overfished these waters off the coast of Europe, and they're always looking for new sources of fish. And they sort of follow the North Atlantic, sort of the similar path to that the Vikings had taken 500, 600 years before. And they come over and start fishing these waters off the coast of Labrador, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Maine, Cape Cod, New England. You can see here is the land of the codfish. So these fishermen start coming over and fishing these waters. Now, when they do that, this is still a long journey. It's not like they go to work in the morning and say, "Okay, honey, see you this afternoon," and then they cross the Atlantic and come back. No, they go over and they're gone for months at a time. Like, for example, imagine maybe they're leaving in the early spring. They come over, they spend the entire summer fishing, and they return with boatloads of fish. Now, you might think, wow, that would be pleasant. Boatloads of fish that have been accumulating all summer long. So they dry the fish. They make them to preserve them. It's dried fish. So to do that, a lot of these fishermen go ashore. They go ashore partially out of curiosity, partially just to get off the ship, partially for food supplies, partially for to trade with native people, partially to set up. They set up camps where they can live, they can dry the fish, and they come into contact with Native Americans and they start exchanging things with them, trading with them, learning from them, and spreading germs to them. Here you can see some fishermen going ashore, being greeted by native peoples. Okay, the notes here, you can pause, but I'm going to read it to you. During the 1500s, many European explorers, fur traders is another group that's going to go over and trade with the Indians. A lot of the fishermen, they start trading with the Indians. And one thing the native people have to trade that the Europeans are very interested in is animal furs, especially beaver furs. We'll find out become very important in the history of our country. So these explorers, fur traders, and fishermen travel to the Americas, and they bring with them plants, animals, and germs, because sometimes they bring food with them. They want to have some fruits and vegetables, so they bring things with them which they plant. More often, they learn about new plants and animals, new plants at least, from the Native Americans, I guess new animals too, and they return to Europe with those. They also, as we said, bring germs, viruses, things like that. They bring those, and then they return to Europe with other plants, animals, and germs. This transfer, which partially was intentional or on purpose. Some things they did bring over on purpose, some things was unintentional. Let me give you an example of something that was intentional. The Spanish explorers who came over after Columbus, on the second voyage even, they wanted transportation. Now, North and South America did not have native horses, so they brought horses with them. They also wanted a supply of meat, so they brought pigs with them. They brought cows with them. They brought these animals with them and introduced them to this continent. Now, over the whole period of exploration, they brought lots of horses, lots of livestock, lots of pigs, and either intentionally or unintentionally, some were released into the wild. And even to this day, there are populations of wild horses in the West that are rounded up because they tend to get out of control. Their populations become too large sometimes. Same with, there are wild pigs that are not around our part of the country so much, although there apparently are some. But in other parts of the country, especially in the South, they can become very damaging to crops and things like that. And those can trace their ancestors back to the time of the explorers. These were not native species or native animals to North and South America. They were brought over intentionally, but then they kind of took their own course, maybe unintentionally. There was also some intentional trade. The Europeans come over and they find out about new crops like corn and things like that they really, are tasty. So they take some back with them to Europe. Another good example, I'm going to pause. I'll come back to the example when we have a better slide to look at. This transfer or exchange, or the mixing that took place, changed the lives of people in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Okay, you can pause if you want to fill that in, and I will go on. Okay, the Columbian Exchange. Here you go. This is what this map sort of symbolizes it. You have these goods, these foods mostly, which did not exist in Europe prior to Columbus and the other explorers coming to the Americas. And then you have these things which did not exist in the Americas, but they existed in Europe or Africa or Asia, and they were brought to the Americas. So some things that were taken to Europe. Beans, cocoa, corn, maize, peanuts, pineapples, potatoes, pumpkins, squash, sweet potatoes, tobacco, tomatoes, and turkeys. Tomatoes is an interesting one because if you think of Italian food, pizza, spaghetti, things like that, you think of tomato sauce. And Italians did not have access to tomatoes before Columbus. So things we think of as Italian food would not have been the same before Columbus. That's all part of this exchange, this mixing, and people's diets or their way of life changes as a result of this. On the other hand, all of these goods, I don't need to read you the whole list, but you notice I mentioned horses, pigs. These things did not exist in North and South America. They are brought over with the explorers. Here's another view of a slightly different map. Gives you some slightly different products, ideas. But it's the same thing. These are things that are coming from the Americas to Europe, Asia. You notice the arrow. These things are being brought from Europe, Africa, and Asia to the Americas. And you notice some of the things that are brought are not so good. The diseases, smallpox, influenza, typhus, measles, etc. They are going to wipe out millions of Native American people. Now, it was not always intentional that they wanted to bring these germs, and it wasn't always a trade saying, hey, you give me some pumpkins and I'll give you malaria. It was more an unintentional result that happened. Okay. This picture is a little bit out of order. This is leading into colonization. So I mentioned the fishermen coming over from Europe and setting up camps in which they would work during the summers, drying their fish and stuff. Here you can see these guys carrying these big cod, these huge fish to smoke. And they built smokehouses. They built camps where they would live for periods of time for the summer. Now, at first, there was no intention to actually stay there. These were just like temporary, like you're going camping, you're setting up these places. As time went on, however, they started to become more permanent fixtures, and people started coming over not just to spend a few months, but they started coming over to live. Now that takes a little while, but it slowly, gradually happens. And this is called colonization, and it leads to colonies. Now, colonies is a definition you're going to need to know. People living in a distant land who are ruled by their mother country. Or another way of saying it, people who are ruled by a distant mother country. So, for example, when we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but when we talk about the 13 British colonies, those are going to be people living in a distant land, America, ruled by a mother country, Britain or England. So to fill in the colonization notes, at first European countries were mostly interested in a water route to Asia, the Spice Islands, but by the end of the 1500s, they became more interested in claiming land and setting up colonies. That's something called colonization. Colonization is the process of setting up colonies. Colonies are groups of people who live in a distant land, but who are ruled by their mother country. The first permanent European settlement, now European means all of Europe. We will mostly focus on English settlements, but the first permanent European settlement, the one where they were planning on staying, was set up in 1565 by Spain. That was called St. Augustine, Florida. St. Augustine, Florida still exists today. The one which we'll talk about more this year, because we're mostly focused on the English, because they will become the colonies that become the United States. In 1607, they're going to set up the first English colony in what is Jamestown, Virginia. St. Augustine, Florida. There it is. Okay, over time, over the 1500s into the 1600s, the Europeans will establish several colonial settlements. You can see the Dutch ones along the Hudson River here. English, we'll learn about a lot. We'll go into these more in the next note sheet, but you can see there's starting to be some settlements by the middle of the 1600s. Okay, this part of the notes, it might be hard to do in Cami. I can't remember if you have to flip it or not. I think I have it set up so you don't have to, but if not, if you want to wait for the paper copy, I'm perfectly okay with that. But just so you know, I don't have one that's handwritten here. The next two slides, this is the causes of European exploration. That would go in this box that says causes. And then the slide after that, the yellow slide will be the effects, which will go right here. So causes, these are things that led to European exploration and colonization. The Crusades increased Europeans' demand for goods from Asia. That's why they wanted to get to Asia. They wanted a water route. Second, European nations hoped to find a water route to Asia. That's connected to that. Europeans became more curious about the world during the time period known as the Renaissance. This is sort of summing up the whole thing. New technologies like caravel ships, navigation tools, printing press, etc., made it possible for exploration and colonization. And then finally, news of Columbus's voyage sort of set off the exploration explosion as it spread throughout Europe. The effects, the results, things that happened because of European colonization. These will be more important as we go forward. First one is Spain is going to build a vast empire. Vast means huge or wide. They will take over they will claim almost all of South America, Central America, and parts of North America. They don't necessarily hold on to all of it, but they will claim it for a while. Millions of Native American Indians are killed or die from diseases. Others are killed through violence. It doesn't turn out so well for most Native Americans. Slavery is going to increase, and we will talk a lot about slavery. Slavery existed already. It existed in Africa. It's going to be introduced into the Americas. In the North America and what will become the United States, it will be in 1619. It will be introduced in Virginia, but we'll talk a lot about slavery. This is going to dramatically increase throughout the world as a result of the European exploration and colonization. New foods are introduced. People's diets changed because of new foods being introduced. Think of all the foods that we have today that are a result of this. Thousands of Europeans will end up migrating to North America and the Columbian Exchange. Okay, that is it for today. Like I said, if you want to wait on this and fill in the notes later, I'm okay with that. So thank you and have a good day.